Hello and welcome to another Cloud Podcast, a podcast designed to bring you stories from the smartest minds in IT, operations, and business, and learn how they're using cloud technology to improve business and the customer experience. Well, Artie, tell me a little bit about your plans this afternoon. This Friday, it's Happy Friday for everybody, right?
Yeah, so Friday before a PTO week, so I'm taking next week off, which is amazing. And the in-laws are here. And I have a special little treat for the in-laws, this beer that we get from the Philippines, and we had it shipped and imported in.
Wow.
It's called Red Horse. And the logo is it's a red label with a horseshoe, and then in the middle is a horse with like a red eyeball. And when you drink this thing in the Philippines, there's something in it that gets you a little wacky, a little crazy. Like it's just there's more than just alcohol in there. We don't know what it is, if it's like ginseng or whatever it is. But the reason why I brought it up was that every time we used to go to the Philippines to the BPO workers and meet and greet and talk to them, you only get two options of beer. It's Red Horse or this other beer called San Miguel Light, which kind of tastes like a High Life. And you get kind of sick of that over time, so you have to switch over to Red Horse. So that's the plan for the afternoon, and hopefully go on an amazing PTO week, and then come back and then do another podcast with you guys.
Get right back after it. I love the idea of taking the beer that has a secret ingredient where you just don't quite know what's in it, but it does something good, right? And it's Friday, so we can let loose a little bit.
Oh yeah, and it makes you feel happy too. Have like a nice brewski at the end of the day, and especially one that's a little unique too and special.
Exactly. So Erika, I'm so glad that you joined us, and I'm excited also just to get to know you, talk about what's going on at Dialpad. There's been a lot of good changes that we've seen in the channel and a lot of buzz around Dialpad and what they're doing. And I don't want to give away any secrets, so I want to let you jump into it. But why don't you, if you can take us back, like how did you even get started into the channel role, into customer service, contact center, with Dialpad, and your career path to where you're at now?
Well, it's amazing. I tell everybody, it blows my mind that I can't believe I've been in this industry for over 15 years. And I started actually back in the East Coast, all places. I'm from Rochester, New York. And I had gotten offered a position over at Paytech back in the day. So I started in the networking world, actually. My first career selling frame relay and MPLS and PRI. So it's kind of nice that I had a good beginning, you know what I mean? Like learning PBXs and all that stuff. So I'm glad I had that experience, but I started cold calling. So I'd worked my way up the chain. Yeah, it was the hardest job I ever had. I'm sure you guys would appreciate it. I ended up moving into the small business team, and I worked with our channel, but in the East Coast. So I dealt with Boston, New York City, that market, very different from California. Very different.
Different culture, yes.
Very different culture, so it's definitely a big change coming to California, but did a small business for a long time, and then I trained customer service. So I spent a lot of time in call centers. We had a lot of different experience with buying different companies and having to merge call centers together. So I've been very grateful to have technical selling experience with customers, I had channel experience, and then in turn, we started doing call centers. And back then it was just very different, the way that we used to have to do things. So when I look at all these modern tools today, very, very much wish I had them back in the day. It would have made my life a lot easier.
Yeah, it's I always say it's like the contact center 1.0, right? Where it's basically you have voice service coming in and you get this fancy thing called ACD and IVR, and it's like, wow, look what we can do now. And all of a sudden you fast forward 15 years and it's just mind blowing on what's out there, right?
We had this thing called Witness, and that was the name we gave it, where all the calls were recorded. And it sounded so intimidating to all these poor call center reps, where we're witnessing your calls, I have no idea why it was called that. It just was. And it was just such a manual process having to go back and pull all that data, because I had no idea if calls were good or not. It was just kind of a guess. So that was kind of fun back in the day to be able to do that. So then I actually transitioned out of training customer service and went back in front of customers, and really went in the channel. But then I ended up moving out here to California. So my husband is like a funny, little tidbit. We met on an airplane.
No way.
Really?
Yeah, we did. So he lived here and I lived in New York, and we dated remote for about a year, actually. Yeah. And he flew to New York to see me. And finally someone said, hey, we should probably take the next step. And I was so stubborn. I'm like, I live in New York. You're going to have to move out here. And then he
Typical,
had a
typical New Yorker.
Yep. I'm like, I got my house, I got a great job. Like, why would I
Yeah.
leave?
I'm a strong woman, no problem. Like, you come to me, honey.
I was like, I got my own house, I have my own dogs, I got my own job,
Yeah.
we're good, you know? So I ended up coming out to California and actually stayed with the same company, but did channel account management out here. So a lot of my background really is mostly customers, dealing in account management in the channel. And that's how I got to know everybody over the years, actually, which I've been so grateful for, because to me, that was the best way to get to know everybody is I manage your customers, I get to work with you guys. So I worked with customers that were typically about $100,000 and above was the
Yep.
role I had. So I did that for some time. And then I ended up making a transition over to TPX, which I'm sure you guys know that company as well, where they
Yep.
had a channel position open. And I thought, well, take a challenge doing something else. And then at the time while I was there, great relationship building, learned a lot also over there, but Dialpad had been trying to recruit me for a little while. So I thought, well, do I want to just do UCaaS and CCaaS? Because I've been doing everything for so many years. You know, could do UCaaS, CCaaS. You could sell infrastructure. You could sell virtualized services, things like that, security. But when they demoed the product, and I actually met with Mike Kane, who's our global VP, I was very impressed. And I thought, you know what, this is definitely something different in the market. And for me to make that kind of jump, because I'm also a very dedicated person, as you guys will learn about me over the years, but very dedicated to people that I love and respect and work with. So it was hard for me to continue kind of making that change, but it was the best change I could have made.
And how long ago was the change when you went from TPX over to Dialpad?
I've been at Dialpad now for about 5 to 6 months or so.
Okay, yeah. So you went through the whole transition of Telepacific becoming TPX and their whole, you know, how they transformed their company away from dial tone and away from PRIs and TDM, T1, you know, all that stuff, and moving more into the cloud and things like that. And I believe on the contact center side, they have a partnership with another carrier that we won't talk about today. For the CCaaS side, so you're able to see the CCaaS on one end from a carrier, and then now moving over to Dialpad, which I got the buzz from Dialpad about 2 years, maybe 3 years ago. This company that has great connectivity internationally because they're in the Google data centers. Can you touch on that a little bit on like why Dialpad is so great internationally beyond just being in Google, but how that all works in the ecosystem?
That's a really good question, actually. So, you know, for Dialpad, I mean, we're obviously using GCP, which is the Google Cloud Platform, stores all the logic. The company was also born post iPhone. So it's a pure software company, which I think is very special in this market because we've got so many UCaaS, CCaaS players out there that were not born in the cloud. And you guys know this, and they weren't software. But now they're trying to take an infrastructure and put a bunch of Band-Aids on it and make it a software now. And that's just my opinion, right? Versus Dialpad, where that happened. So from a global perspective, we've actually got a bunch of different Equinox data centers that we're using with GCP that allows us to provide that service worldwide and globally. And we had the recognition and recognize that that was something that was very important. So all these other countries like, you know, Japan and China, you've got call centers all over the globe. And our executive leadership recognized that being something important. So that's where the investment really started to happen at the beginning was, okay, well, if we're going to do this to expand the telephony network, we're going to have Equinox data centers in different places, right? Still store it over GCP. And we've got a very close relationship with Google, as you guys are aware of as well, too. But we'll probably touch on that at some point in this conversation.
Yeah, and let's drill into it a little bit more. So we talked about, you touched on a while ago, you touched on 10 years ago, maybe 15 years ago, it was UCaaS and CCaaS. And now with cloud and open API and all of these microservices and all of these clouds that you guys as suppliers and vendors can use, like Google, now you have this convergence where it really isn't a UCaaS, it's both, or it can be multiple things. So where are you guys headed in the future? What is the next kind of area that you're expanding to? What's on the roadmap and on the horizon in the next year or a couple of years?
I love that you asked that question because we just had a sales kickoff not that long ago where they just kind of announced a lot of this stuff. So I can't share everything necessarily, but Dialpad's really going to become a major disruptor in this space for sure. With kind of obviously recognizing, and you guys know, it's very much what are the key softwares out there, the key systems that people are using where we can integrate with, right? That's something that's also really important. How do we efficiently effectively help customers with call centers or contact centers or just overall service, like agent efficiency, because I think that's the next wave. I listened to a podcast, by the way, the last one you guys did, or it might have been one of the first ones you did, and you had brought up already that there were 3 different buckets that you had seen for UCaaS and CCaaS, and Dialpad's very much falling into that second and that third bucket. Where we're looking very much to be that next generation cloud offering for people. And that's really, to me, that direction that we're starting to go in. We're very much dabbling a lot more in that mid-market and enterprise space because companies are starting to look more for consolidated products. They don't want to have to go to 5 different softwares to log into something. And yeah, we can talk about paying, having one bill and a customer account manager, but you just get all those things anyway. Like everybody's a trusted advisor and provides, white glove service. Like that's kind of the joke I have with some of my friends, like everybody does that. But at the end of the day, I mean, we're investing so much into the software itself to be able to expand a lot more with these bigger companies because everybody's got fast evolving changes, like constantly. Like there's the next thing that they've got to look for. So be on the lookout for a lot of that. We did also publicly announce recently we have a partnership with T-Mobile, and just to prove the product in the pudding, out of all the suppliers that they could choose from to partner with on the UCaaS CCaaS platform, they chose Dialpad. So that also to me very much speaks a huge amount of volumes as to where our product's starting to go.
Yeah,
That's
having
pretty
those key
amazing.
Partnerships is critical, right? And when a big company like T-Mobile comes in and it's like, we want to choose you because of the different different features and benefits that you guys offer. But I like how Dialpad, and you can maybe go on this a little bit more though, has it's unique, the unique customer, right? Like some carriers will say we can do it all, right? What's your ICP? What's your individual ideal customer profile? And I was like, oh, well, we can sell to anyone. Like it just drives me nuts because it's like, well, you have to have a differentiator. And that's what was interesting about Dialpad is like, there is that differentiator beyond just like the Google and international presence. Like, what would you say is like the sweet spot or a couple of sweet spots that Dialpad really fits into?
So, I mean, obviously, I would love to sit here and say we fit with everybody, but I'm very much honest. Like when we meet with customers and we do discovery meetings, sometimes there's a time and place for everybody. It doesn't always mean that it's going to be a Dialpad that's a fit, but I see a lot of fit for us where you've got a lot of customers that are looking for mobile first, right? Where people are starting to live on the computers, they're starting to live on the mobile device and on their computer, on their phones as well, like we all do. That's a very solid fit for us. And yes, we still do hard phones like everybody else does, because I think hard phones are a necessary thing out there. That's just what you're seeing. But we're starting to see like one of our largest customers is over 20,000 seats that we have. So, I mean, we're starting to really dabble a lot in that enterprise space when it comes to what we're offering. But something that's very special about us, I'm sure you guys have heard about it, but the AI and VI technology that we have. So it does the real-time transcribing. And we acquired that company back in 2019. It's called Talk IQ. And that right there is amazing because we can use that kind of data in a phone conversation. There's just so much information in a date, like just in a call, that you can equate into so many other things. So again, companies that are looking at it going, God, my call center is really performing poorly. I'm losing customers. I'm churning customers. I have no idea what's happening and why. Well, you can take like VI technology and watch what's happening in real time with the call and then fix it or do whatever. So, but sorry, Alex, you were going to say something.
No, I was just going to agree because that BI technology, that's where you really see it being played in with mid-market and enterprise companies, right? The SMB market, they're barely scratching into getting into ERPs and different systems like to manage their business. But when you get up to that bigger level, the BI technology, and it's interesting how you're able to merge the AI, so you're real-time transcribing, conversations. But then it's like, well, how do you take all that data? And that's where the BI comes in and say, okay, now what can we learn from this? Yes. Right? Where are these trends hitting? Are people saying no, yes, I'm unhappy, like cancel? I'm starting to take those moments in those calls. And I'd imagine with all your experience and with customer experience in the contact center, like having that critical information is just it's a gold mine for a team lead or for a manager of a contact center.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
And Alex, you and I have been consulting a lot together, and we've been trying to help people through this transition from on-premise to the cloud. And sometimes they get stuck with, well, do I start with UCaaS or do I start with CCaaS? And thankfully, there's tools like Dialpad where they can do either first, or they can do both all at the same time. We call that the Big Bang implementation. The interesting thing, though, is when we have these conversations, and Alex, this question's a little bit more for you. Usually, they're asking about the more advanced features first, like chatbots and BI tools and speech analytics and sentiment analysis. But we have to kind of start them back in the beginning and say, okay, before you get there, that's maybe the second or third step. Let's start talking about UCaaS and CCaaS. Let's migrate you to the cloud. Let's make sure that everyone is comfortable with that tool set. Then let's turn on all the cool bells and whistles. Of course, in your RFP, or as you're going through your purchasing decision, you want to decide 2 or 3 years out that this partner is going to be the best, a long-term partner versus a short-term partner. But I guess the question really is to Alex, how do you realign with the person you're consulting and let them, take a step back and reframe the conversation around, let's just get you into the cloud. Let's migrate UCaaS and CCaaS first. Like how do you do that? How do you manage those expectations as opposed to just letting it go way too wild and start talking about chatbots on the first day?
Yeah, it's easy to jump 3 years ahead, 5 years ahead of where they can be. It's exciting, right? It's the bots, the AI, all these things that you can do that's going to improve the contact center. But like you said, we're walking them back and say, let's start with the foundation, right? So which carrier is going to be the best foundation for your organization? And then my 3 favorite words this year, and it's through one of my business partners, crawl, walk, run. I'm a dreamer. I love to just look big, like into the future on what's going on. And he's always like, crawl, walk, run. Like, let's just start here. Then we walk, then we go faster and faster. And it's the same thing when implementing a contact center. It's like, let's just take the features and functionalities you love about ShoreTel or you love about Cisco. Make sure those all work with the cloud platform. Once you have that, it's running, there's user adoption, everyone's humming along nicely. Then it's a really good customer success manager or part of our team helping, okay, now what's the next step? Let's look at bots, let's look at AI, let's look at all the bells and whistles of what's going to improve. And it's taking it one project at a time, because you want to be able to A/B test. You want to be able to, make sure that you're getting the results you want before just throwing it all on top. So then you can say, okay, well, the chatbot improved efficiency by 10%, but maybe the AI over here, or maybe some sort of integration with, ServiceNow gave us 20%, but if you're doing it all at once, you're not going to be, how are you going to track how each one is doing individually? If you just throw them all in there, you're not going to know. So you want to really segregate them out and piecemeal it slowly together to build that full solution with the roadmap of getting to that AI and getting to the BI portion of it. And then it's just a matter of how fast the company or the organization wants to go to get there, right? Because there's a lot of change management that's involved, and it's a heavy lift, but it's worth it. If the leadership sees the vision, has the vision for it, then it's just executing. And I'm sure you've been through it many times already with you. But Erika, what I'm curious about, so I can go deeper into that whole topic about how to go from a crawl, walk, run. But I'm also curious about, what do you see in your times of being part of a contact center as what makes a good experience? How did you, shape organizations to have a good experience? What does that look like? What steps did they take to get to those improved metrics that they're tracking?
That is such a good question, because we were acquiring companies left and right. And it was, okay, great, we've got this call center, now merge this call center in. Great, get these reps trained, now let's get them rolling on this product. I can remember, and I always share this story, because it just clearly has always stuck with me, but we had bought a bunch of companies that had call centers in the Philippines. And our role was to take the Philippines call center and educate them on all our processes and talking to customers. And, obviously people loved having US support at the time. This is, 10 years ago or so, loved having US support. So we had to introduce in the Philippines. So we did all this training. We showed them how to do things, gave them metrics as to how to maybe get around an escalation, all this information. And then we made them go live. The amount of escalations our management team took was astronomical. And I just remember, what is going on? We trained these reps. This isn't, we can't figure it out. all we had at the time was this brand new software. And I brought up Witness earlier in the conversation. Witness.
Witness
And it
protection.
was, yeah, witness protection, right? Like, oh, I'm going to witness you in the act of a bad call, right?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. So we're digging in Witness, which was also used for scoring because we had a QA department that would manually go into Witness and pick a call and just score it. And like manual scoring, they would just kind of like listen to it and say, okay, well, this went well. And here's why, check the box kind of thing. But I just remember having to dig for calls. What's happening? And have to find one. And I didn't even know if it was going well or not going well. So it was basically, hey, we're going to send some people to the Philippines. That's how we had to try to address it, was send people to the Philippines and be there for a month at a time to try to work with the reps on handling these calls. And obviously not very efficient use of people's time, very, very costly and expensive, versus today, I look at a lot of tech that, and again, I have to really real quick go back to crawl, walk, run. I could not agree more with that. I'm actually going to totally take that statement if you guys don't mind, because
it's free. I didn't coin it,
it's
so
free.
it's all yours.
We'll copyright after today under you guys for sure. But it just, for us, like the tech wasn't really there at the time, but it was just basically very fast-paced environment, buying companies left and right, getting these people trained. And then before I knew it, we ended up selling to another company. Like we sold to another company. And then they sent me to that company to learn all their processes and do the same thing over and over again. Just basically sending people everywhere to migrate all of this. So there was no way that we were very efficient. But today you can take technology and just using the AI and VI we're talking about, and just a lot of what Dialpad's doing. And Artie, you had mentioned like real-time sentiment as well too. We can actually take the call and see if it's going positive or negative today. So back then I could have had this call from the Philippines coming in and read what's happening in real time, if it's going well or not. And then as the trainer, I could have jumped in to help, or I could have just messaged them, or you can even create coaching cards. Like there's a lot of amazing things that you can do where it could have been, hey, Mr. Rep, if this word comes up, boom, here's a card. Here's how you can get around it. Here's some talk track around it, or here's some links to pricing, or here's this, so that you can just take care of the escalation. And then that equates to happier customers, right? Because then your customers are calling in and they're happy. So I reflect back on just very manual process, very manual, having to be in front of people, no real systems in place other than our recording tool we had. That was it.
So, I mean, it seems like it just relies so much on intuition, which how do you train intuition? You try to take someone that's been in the contact center management for 20, 30 years. They're like, I know what I'm doing. Like I've heard these calls a million times, like, and they've got this great experience with them, but it's like, well, how do you scale that? How do you scale that intuition and experience? You can't. So like, I'm sure as you saw, like you're at this, contact center in the Philippines, and it's like you're scraping through these recordings, but it's still very well. It seems like maybe it's going sideways here. Maybe that's the case for everybody else. And you make a little iteration. That doesn't work. Oh crap! Now I got to go over here and try this, and that doesn't work. I mean, imagine, like, did you ever, like, how did you did you find a solution that worked? And I'm curious in that call center in the Philippines.
At that time, we really did not. We ended up basically just shifting it where they just took the residential calls. And then the business calls were going into the New York call center. And then we had another call center in Iowa. So we just kind of shifted that where the business was going there. But, same thing. We had two different call centers handling two different types of calls, and then having to merge those as well. So it was a very convoluted process, but it was just very manual. They really had no actual solution other than, hey, we're just going to make them residential. Here's how that's going to work, and then we'll have a management team in the Philippines that'll handle that. And we'll keep that separate from the United States division. And that's what we did.
Yeah, you wove the white flag, like I give up. Let's just do this, do that, and just stop this experiment because it's not working.
No, right? And it was still a critical part of the business though too. And that's the thing, that we had no resolution, and there was no software, there was no product to really be able to fix it at the time.
So I was on a call earlier today with a consultant, and we were talking a little bit about what their contact center needs are. They've got multiple BPOs across the world, and one of the requirements were, we're going to use MS Teams for Collaborate, but that's only going to be for the US based offices. All of the team members in the Philippines and in Europe, they're not going to get MS Teams licenses. So they had this huge problem, this collaboration problem, where they couldn't communicate directly from one site to the other. So you've got, two contact centers, let's say one in the Philippines, one in Europe, and there's no way for them to talk to each other. There's no way for them to go on an MS Teams meeting. They don't have Zoom. So let's talk a little bit about Dialpad and your internal collaboration tool. I know you guys have a video conferencing internal collaboration tool that can be used externally as well. Let's talk a little bit about those features and how you guys came to market with that.
Well, actually, Dialpad, this is why I love the kind of the history and story at Dialpad, because our executives did come from Google, right? So they have that innovative mindset already. They understand the way I always say Google's the biggest company in the world, and they are. Like, they understand the inner workings of it. The first product they started was a product called Uber Conference, which was a collaboration tool.
Oh, yeah.
And it's a video tool. They ended up winning a lot of different awards. I think TechCrunch, a couple other things based on that. But obviously the goal was eventually to make work from anywhere a solid solution and make calls simple, right? And obviously video is a part of calls, especially today, right? So we've really added a lot more onto those collaboration tools over time because it's become mission critical today. We bought a company called Hi5 recently, as of last year. And Hi5 gives us the ability to, obviously we can record everything. It gives full HD quality, which it is amazing when all of a sudden you see HD quality on a camera and you're like, whoa, because you can just see the difference from someone else's video. Yeah, exactly. You're like, that's why I got
a lot of money to get this.
You're like, see, it doesn't normally look this good. I'm just saying.
Yeah, it's not just me, it's the camera.
Exactly, the camera. And so we have the whole HD quality that comes along with it. Obviously, we need the ability to have a bunch of different people on there. But what I love with our collaboration tool, and it's just rolling out now, is that VI and AI tech now also works with it in real time. So even though you're now having this collaboration and we're meeting, and you could do it worldwide as well too. Like if we had someone in, a certain country, we could also still do that with the US. It's all done via link, but it's all transcribed. So we could be having this conversation now on a Dialpad collaboration tool, and I could actually see what was happening in real time and then go back and look at it later and have all the notes of our meeting. So I could have had our entire podcast actually transcribed and recorded. It's pretty cool. Like that just came out. And I was like,
that's pretty cool. Hopefully the sentiment for this podcast is positive, 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 not negative, negative, but that is pretty cool. Neutral, yeah.
Neutral.
It'll be way high, Artie. It's gonna be it's gonna blow the lid off of sentiment.
Yeah, I'm gonna get my supervisor's gonna call me and tell me that this podcast was not high enough sentiment score. I know it.
They're gonna do old school whisper into the call.
Yeah, exactly. Witness protection, though.
Exactly. Witness protection, whisper in the call. I love it. That was a really good question. So I have a question actually for you guys specifically, because obviously you guys are doing more of the consulting role. I've got my own opinions of just the industry and what's happening and where we're kind of seeing things. But where are you guys seeing artificial intelligence as an example in the industry growing today? Do you see it being something very massive or something very small with your customers?
Ooh, I'll start on this one. This is my wheelhouse. I wrote a book and I'm writing a second book. I'm not going to actually plug the book because I've plugged it on every podcast. People are sick of it. But the second book is almost complete. It's halfway through. I haven't completed it because I'm waiting to write about the pandemic, post-pandemic, and this migration to work from home and how AI affects that. But my impression is that there are people out there who know that AI and machine learning and all these technologies in that realm are going to help their business. It's going to help their business not only with understanding their KPIs, understanding what's happening, getting a good pulse of what's happening with their customers and with their agents and with their business and their ROI, but also help them potentially forecast into the future. So using AI not only for forecasting of headcount, like how many people do I need, the third Wednesday in November this year, or using it to say, okay, this is how my sentiment is trending. Is it going to trend lower, lower, lower? If I change something, will it, go higher, higher, higher? So predictive analytics and AI and machine learning on those types of kind of metadata. So that's where I think it's going. It's not quite there yet. I think one of the problems that we have is everyone knows they want AI. Everyone wants to get there. It's hard enough for them just to get a chatbot in place. And that is almost one of the simplest because now there's so many vendors out there. There's so many tools. You could build your own. It's like almost turnkey, but it's still extremely hard for someone at a company to be able to research, implement, deliver a chatbot. So we have to make that a little bit easier. It needs to be a little checkbox for them to enable some sort of chatbot, and then we can get to the more advanced stuff. But yeah, when you pull a focus group together and ask them, how many of you have a chatbot today? It's usually about 10%. How many of you want a chatbot today? It's the other 90%. And
Right.
we always ask them after that, why don't you have it? And it's always, we don't have enough resources. We don't know what the actual ROI is going to be. And we don't have the talent. We don't have the people who can build it for us. It's just not possible with the resources we have today.
Well, see, and that's where you guys are an amazing critical part of all of this, just everything. You know, it's like really helping customers source that out because they just don't even know. And again, to Alex, the crawl, walk, and run, right? It's almost like in the run, a little bit in like the walking phase, right? We're just kind of helping them figure it out. So I think that's pretty important.
Yeah, I mean, I see it where the cloud was 10 years ago, where it was this big thing, the cloud. What does it even mean? Half the time you talk to people that aren't in technology, like they don't even know what it is, that it's just a bunch of servers at a data center hosted by somebody else. And I saw, you know, with UCaaS, when it started getting adopted very slowly, right? Because it's this new big thing. And just like any technology, I think with AI, where I'm seeing it is enterprises, no problem. They have resources, they can pull people, developers, they have their Salesforce developers, they have all sorts of people running, you know, Six Sigma, anything you name it, like they're all over it. And they can go out and test this out. And if it fails, $1 million test, and they just throw it in the bucket, say, well, that was a good shot. We're not ready for it yet, right? The mid-market SMB, I feel like it's like, forget about it. Unless it's out of the box, cookie cutter, plug it in and go, like a chatbot, right? Already like, that's not even there yet. AI is a whole nother level on top of a chatbot. So it's really going to be that same thing. It's the enterprise adoption, and then it trickles down all the way down to SMB eventually. It's all dependent on then by industry and the resources that industries have. I used to work with a lot of construction companies, and they have zero IT resources when you compare it to, you know, medical, or you compare it to financial, where they have tons of resources. And that's where it's going to happen. It's going to happen in those industries that have all the resources, have tons of IT staff, and they're going to be able to test it out and get it working. And Amazon's a perfect example. I mean, they built their own system because they had the resources. So they didn't have to go out and buy a contact center. They just created their own platform. So that's where AI is going to trickle down and have that same effect. You know?
Yeah, and I'll give you an example of a customer I've been consulting recently, and they don't have AI today. They know they want it. I'm not going to say the company name, but they're a equipment rental company for contractors. So they will rent you chainsaws and, you know, the crane boom cranes that will get you up into a tree, and all these different tools and things for construction workers. 80% of their calls, and they go to a live agent, you know, it's press 1 for this, press 2 for that, it goes to a live agent. They have to wait, you know, 10 minutes to talk to someone. It's super annoying. A huge portion of their calls, it's all about, can I rent this product, this chainsaw, for another day? Can I return it tomorrow instead of today? That's all it really is, because they're on the job. They're literally doing the job. They didn't complete the job. They need to rent the cement mixer or whatever it is for one more day. I told him, it's like, you can create a chatbot or AI or whatever it is to identify those intents that are coming in based off of what they're saying. You know, how may I help you today? And it says, oh, I need to rent this for another day. And then just look up exactly what they rented and then do the actions in the back and say, no problem, drop it off tomorrow. We'll charge your company's credit card or whatever that is. It's a pretty simple process. It's not complex. And literally it would save tens of thousands of dollars a day in his contact center. So those are just some of the simple things that we can think of. But once we get everyone to that level, then we could start really talking about the fun stuff.
The interesting part that I'm curious about, sorry to interrupt, Erica, on that is, okay, so you can implement this AI to fix that one piece of customers, right? Then it's, how do you train the customer to either go through a bot or train them, or will they be okay with going through the phone and having a self-service menu. Will they be able to handle that, and will it be adopted by the customer? I think that's another like tricky like nuance or a monkey wrench that gets thrown into these great ideas. It's like, well, how do we get it to where there's adoption?
And what he was thinking of was the second iteration was don't even force them to call in to rent it for another day. If it's the end of day, outbound text message them saying, we notice you still have this. Do you want to rent it for another day and drop it off tomorrow? And they could just say yes, or
no,
just don't reply, and then they just rent it to the next day.
Well, it's amazing.
Omnichannel.
Yeah, exactly. And it's amazing because everyone's going to respond to a chat, like in their text, like a text on their phone, like a simple yes or a no. And from a customer adoption perspective, I think it takes time, but I think it's possible. It takes training, it takes time, but whatever you can do to make it easier for them where they don't have to think about it, I think is how it would be adopted, I guess.
Yeah, and Erika, let's talk about Dialpad and Omnichannel. So what channels do you guys support? I know it's such a long list. You probably will miss one or two of them, but
Your favorite?
what do you guys support? I know traditional channels, but beyond just the phone, chat, email, what can you guys support?
Well, I mean, we're obviously doing a little bit. We're not a full omni-channel UCaaS, CCaaS provider today, but we are working with a lot of third-party applications that'll do it. So Salesforce obviously is one of them, where almost everybody and their mother is in Salesforce right now. But being in Salesforce, the kind of omni-channel integration we have with that is very direct and unique, where you can still live and breathe in Salesforce, use all those same applications. People use also Zendesk today. They're using Slack. A lot of those applications we can integrate very natively with, very native integration. But we also obviously have open APIs. So if there's like some kind of third-party omni-channel application that they want to be using or chat, we do have that ability to work with them via open API. But I would just say, again, like we had our little kickoff. Can't say much, but you know, keep the ears open.
Coming.
Quarter. Yeah.
I like it.
We'll keep a pulse on Dialpad to see what they're announcing soon. When are you going to announce this little nugget that you're hiding from us?
When they say, okay, Erika, you can say that now. But there's a lot of really good stuff coming down the pipe for us too, you know, in general on the omni-channel side, because omni-channel really is one of those things that is important. People want chat bots. They want to be able to send out certain kinds of messaging. And we've been able to, at least if we've got a customer where, like already you brought up, being able to send out a specific chat, we have ways that we can at least work through that for now. And that's, again, the uniqueness of Dialpad, I think, where we can get very custom and unique, because again, being in a software also gives us that capability to also really work around anything the customer's looking for. So just being like upfront, that's where we are today, but it's definitely coming way down the future. But Salesforce, all those things, we're very, very open to all those applications that people use today.
And what makes your product different than a lot of the non-built in the cloud is that you guys have open API and you guys can configure third-party integrations or integrations into, you know, bring your own whatever, you know, carrier, bot, whatever it is. Whereas some of the more monolithic tools that came from on-prem to kind of hybrid cloud, and then now they're touted as cloud, but not really cloud. They can only do specific integrations because they don't have a full open API for everyone. They have to have a partner ecosystem that is grab what you need, but you can only choose the ones that we work directly with experience. So it's very good to note that you guys are a part of, I would like to call it the Internet of Things, where you could plug and play whatever you want, just like on your phone. We could download any app you want, as opposed to having to physically type out all the credentials and things for your API. So that's something to note.
Well, and even just partnerships too in general. I think a lot of companies are also doing a lot of kind of partnerships. And if there's something that Dialpad can't do, I'm also very upfront about that. But we also do have other partnerships that we'll utilize, and we're very open about what it is. But most of all of our stuff that we're doing today is 100% Dialpad owned and proprietary to us. So if we did have to bring in something third, we'd tell you. Most of the time, 99% of the time, we're not having to. But it's something that's also there as well. Like everybody else is also having to do that as well too. But we're not band-aiding anything, which is kind of nice.
Yeah, you see a lot of companies that are taking, okay, we're this is what we do, but now, well, let's go purchase a company, and then you try to do this integration to make this other system try to work. I've seen that a million times just with CenturyLink, which is now Lumen. They've gobble up all these companies, and they take these great smaller carriers, gobble them up, and then it's like, oh, like we loved Paytech,
Yeah.
right?
And then
We
they
loved TW Telecom before like they all got absorbed into these big companies, and then it kind of just ruins that experience, right? And that's what's nice about being, hey, you want to work with that? Great, we'll just do an API, bring it in, no problem. You pay them, you pay us, like it's all good, right?
which I like.
What does Dialpad do on like workforce management, workforce optimization? Do you have key partners that you have great integrations with? Do you have your own? What does that look like on your end?
So we're working eventually to do a little bit of workforce management. We're not necessarily in that space right now, but we are utilizing partnerships to be able to do that. And again, like if there was a certain, scenario that came across our plate, we would absolutely work our way around that. So I would say with Dialpad, we are an all-in-one single platform, right? We're modern, born in the cloud. If we have omni-channel needs, we'll make it work, right? We'll kind of use different types of parties, and we'll be honest as to the ways that we can do it. Workforce management is also very similar for us as well too, where we'll keep open APIs for any kind of platforms they need or software they need. We'll try to get very boutique in the software to work through it. But again, that's why I say perk your ears for the next quarter or so, because there's a lot of that also in there.
Yeah. So one of
Yeah,
the questions that Artie and I always like to ask is
that's
what's your
exactly where I was
favorite
going.
What's your favorite experience or brand where you're like, man, these guys just hit it out of the park when it comes to customer experience? We're kind of digressing away from the tech and just more high level, great brand, great experience. Any story you have, like I'm like, wow, they blew my socks off.
I'm gonna totally put myself in the East Coast, but Tim Hortons coffee by far is my favorite place ever. Every time I go back to New York, I always go to Tim Hortons. I'd go to the same one. They always blew my socks off because they always remembered me, my face. They knew my order every single time, which could be a curse or a good thing. I don't know. It could be bad. But I just remember always going through. They were very solid when it came to service. I'm also so picky about coffee, where I'm like, please don't put sugar in there. And if they did, they were so sweet about always fixing it. I never had to get, aggressive to get it fixed or done or take care of it. They were just so like apologetic and great. So I would say Tim Hortons is like one of my favorite places in the whole wide world to go, because they always were so wonderful and nice when I went through. And I would say Nordstrom's is always the best experience too. So I'm like Tim Hortons, Nordstrom, but Nordstrom takes everything back. They,
Yeah.
And if you could hit both of those in the same day, you get your coffee, then you go shopping while you're drinking your coffee.
Yeah.
You touched on the coffee thing. That's exactly what we talked about with Graham on the last call as well too. Coffee, it's one of those things where if you don't get it right as a company and with customer service, you can tank. Like loyalty with coffee industry is through the roof. If you love a specific brand, you're going to be loyal to them to the day you die.
Oh, 100%.
It's the commodity market, right? So it's like if you're a commodity, it has to be something else, right? And the Tim Hortons is a great example, right? Where it's like amazing customer experience, amazing customer service, and they treat you well. You get the warm and fuzzies, and you want to keep coming back. And I think the hard part that businesses or B2B or B2C, like bigger organizations have is how do you balance that great customer service with the finance department on, well, what's it going to cost to have that great experience, right? I know it might be easier for coffee companies or retailers in coffee to do it than it is for other companies, right? Maybe the margins aren't as big and things like that. And I think that's where I think everyone deep down knows, like, hey, give a great experience to your customers. You'll keep them and you'll get more. But it's that, well, why doesn't everybody do it, right? Is the hard one.
So my wife loves coffee, and she is a diehard. It's this tiny little shop in Old Town Tustin. It's called Morning Lavender, and I don't drink coffee. I know, just yell at me if you want, but I don't drink coffee. But we go there all the time.
Guy.
tea and alcohol. Those are my two
there
things.
There you go. Sometimes together.
We'll go there, and she'll get a coffee, and it'll be in the most basic, like I don't know. You buy it at like a Smart and Final, like just a basic cup. And it's a very cute, boutique-y, like beautiful inside. The coffee is supposed to be amazing. And I asked her, I was like, why don't they spend some money on their cups? Like, that's their marketing. You're holding that cup. Everyone's going to ask you, where'd you get that coffee? And she turned to me and she said, the coffee's so good that they don't need to spend the money on that stuff. Like it sells itself. It'll sell itself off the shelf. And that's kind of the interesting thing to think about. Alex, to your point, it's like, you can create an amazing experience and it be extremely cost effective, and still retain customers. You don't have to have the like custom like Starbucks logo and all the stuff and on your straw and all the things like that. You don't have to spend that extra money to buy your customers. The loyalty comes from customer experience.
Oh my gosh, you guys are really hitting so much like here for me because obviously you can tell from my background, account management, customer service training. Like to me, at the end of the day, it was always about the customer, and that's actually. And I know people probably always hit on this with their podcasts, and like I said earlier, everybody is a white glove service person, right? But that's what I like with Dialpad. They actually recognize that the customers are important too. Our partnerships are important. Our customers are important. If something's wrong, how do you address it? And that's what people pay attention to is like, how quickly did you fix something? How quickly did you respond to it? Did you take my escalation? Were you at least nice to me when you took my escalation? First call resolution, when you talk about call centers, like did the call get resolved on the first call kind of thing? People really care about that. And whenever you think about just all those other experiences you have, people have so many more bad experiences, I think, sometimes than they do good experiences. And if you can at least stand out in that market with that better experience, that's going to make you successful. But it is taking care of your customers. It comes down to that. So anyway, I was like,
no, that's where word of mouth comes in. That's where we're talking about it here. You're talking about your favorite brand, right? And we try not to go into like, what's your worst experience? Because I want to slam any brands, but they're definitely there. And I've got some in my back pocket where it's like offline, like, oh, we can just go days on the bad experiences. And it's almost like you remember those more than the good ones. It's like when you're growing up, you remember the bad times where your parents got mad at you or you did something wrong. And like, not all the times they hugged you and gave you loves and kisses and stuff like that, right? It's bad experiences that like really shine a light because it hurt. Like deep down, it's about the justice of it. Like, I shouldn't be treated this way.
And that's usually when we're talking to people and helping them pick a new vendor, that's usually the first thing they say is the pain points of the current product. And it's not necessarily features. It's like they don't pick up the phone when I call them and it doesn't really have 99.999% uptime. It has like 99.8 or whatever, which is okay, but like not good enough for me. Like they always dwell on the negative, and then that's why they want to migrate, which is always interesting because the product that they have sometimes is still an amazing product. It may have one or two areas that can get better, but sometimes it's just as good as the next thing that they want to purchase. So it's, to your point, Alex, like people will always shine on the negative stuff before they go to the positives.
Oh, 100% agree with that for sure. That's why I just always remember asking, what's the best part of your day? And I ask my family that every day. And I'm like, wait, oh my gosh, let's not talk about the day. I'm like, well, something good had to happen. Like one good thing, just tell me. I do that every night at our house.
The positive, right? The attitude of gratitude. That's always good.
Every morning, my wife and I, we joke because we're like, oh, I got to drive to work, which we're all working from home. So it's like just walking from the kitchen to the office. But we always say to each other, it's going to be a good day. It's going to be a good day. So if you always start with like something positive, then when you're going through your day, you're going to remember the things like, oh, I told myself it was going to be a good day and this thing happened. And it is a good day, as opposed to the negatives. And doing it ahead of time is better than doing it after when you're like reflecting like, oh, what happened today? All you're going to think about is like 3 or 4 things that were not as positive. So always frame yourself in the positive. And we try to do that with not only our podcast, but with our guests as well too. And that's why we love having you on here on the podcast. I'm trying to wrap it up in a clean way.
Good job, Artie. I was going to do it, but you just took over. I love it.
You guys are great because I was like, wait, let me say something else.
Well, do you have one last comment, Erika? Because you can jump in and say your final piece if you have one.
Well, I just wanted to thank you guys so much first off for having me because it is amazing. I said to Artie, just being able to talk about what a small world this whole industry is, just this whole small world thing. And I very honored to be here because just the way the connecting universe was, that's all I'm going to say. Just knowing people and everything else. I'm very grateful for this friendship and everything in the industry. But the other part too is just really grateful that you guys interviewed me on Dialpad. I think it's, for me, very much a company that's emerging in the market. We're competing with a lot of those bigger players out there. But what's really nice about that is we're talking about customer experience. You're working with a company that's a little smaller than the competition, but the customers get better attention, in my opinion, when you're dealing in that space. I've been there, many, many years ago. So that's something else too that I think is amazing. It's a great product, great service. I'm really happy I joined, but I'm also very honored to be here, guys. So thank you so very much.
Absolutely welcome. And it's been a pleasure chatting with you. And I love it. I wish we could go on for hours more, but Artie's got a horse with a weird eye on a beer.
red horse.
Waiting for you.
gotta have a drink before the weekend. And thank you guys all for joining the podcast.
You got it.
Well, that wraps up the show for today. Thanks for joining, and don't forget to join us next week as we bring another guest in to talk about the trends around cloud contact center and customer experience. Also, you can find us at adleradvisors.com, LinkedIn, or your favorite podcast platform. We'll see you next week on another Cloud Podcast.